Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. So today we are going to talk about making or designing jigs. Or should I say the proper way of designing a jig. Now, this is not to be confused with a fixture. A fixture does a little bit of a different process. A fixture is meant to hold a piece in a certain position while work is being done to that item. As where a jig is meant to manipulate an item or the form of an item in a controlled manner. Or rather, you are using that jig as a way of backing up to form something around it in a controlled-like manner. So, I recently did a video on doing these little drawer pulls, and this one is for Graham Pepper. He's a longtime supporter of the channel and subscriber, and he asked me, how would you go about designing a jig for this here, for this little trunk handle, if you will, or drawer pull, something like that. And so I'm going to share with you the process that you need to go through if you want to take and design any jig. Any jig to your imagination, whether it's doing a drawer handle like this one, it's doing a chest pull like this one, or it's doing a door handle like this one, doing a door pull, something like this. This process will be all the same. So the very first thing that you need to do in designing your piece, or your jig, if you will, is if you have a client, say like a cabinet maker that you're making these little drawer pulls for, right? And this is going to be for business. And you want to make a lot of money with these, and you want to make them repetitive, and you want to get the same result outcome every time. We're going to need to take and design this jig. The best way to take and do that is to take and already have a pre-made sample up for the client. Do not, and I repeat, do not make a jig and then hope that it'll work out to produce the form that you're trying to get after. You need to make the form first, whenever possible, and then make the jig to fit that form. Because ultimately, jigs are meant to replicate pieces, okay, multiple times, and to make them all same. So, that starts with your design of the actual item to begin with. So, when you start forging on something, you need to take notes. Like, this is 1/4 inch square, right? So, I'm going to just put a 2 up here for squared, okay? This is 1/4 inch squared by 5 inches long, okay? And then you want to add where you forged in, or down on these, by 2 1/2 inch ends, right? 1/2 inch ends. You want to take this notation down for the item that you're making. So this way you always come out with the same exact length of bar stock. Now, this is going to be a minutia alert, because I'm going to get into a little bit of math here, and I'm going to get into some of the minutia about building a jig. But if you listen to my advice, you will be able to build any type of jig for any sort of thing. Today, because I'm not going to take and ruin the sensors in my camera to do welding, and I do not have the proper filtering equipment just yet to do that, I am not going to show you the welding process. I will, however, make a jig today, get it all welded up, and then I'll show you it in actual function, but I am not going to take and show the welding processes. So just to be clear about that. Now, you take your notations of your original starting stock size, then you make your item. You get this item approved by your customer that that's what they're wanting, and they're wanting 57 more just like it, and now you're in business. Now you can design your jig. So, the easiest way to take and design your jig is to break it down to its simplest of elements. What is it doing? Okay, we've got a bend in it. So we've got one bend, we've got 2 bends, and we've got a 3rd bend here. So we've got 3 bends in this jig, in this item. So what steps are you planning on the jig to be used for? Are you going to use it more as like a fixture where you're going to have to try to punch holes in it and it needs to hold this form while you punch holes, or this or that? I wouldn't really suggest that for a jig. You can make fixturing components if you're getting into the thousands of these or something like that, but I wouldn't really worry about that because this can be effective enough. So now the next step is to take and create the various elements for this form. So you can lay it on your bench table, if you will, and you can take and trace around the item. That's the easiest way to do it, is trace the item. And yeah, it's going to look a little bigger than what it actually is. It may not be 1000% accurate, but you can always tweak it and fine tune it at a later date. So we'll go ahead and just trace around the item here, okay? And that'll get us our general form, shape, and size of volume that we need to take on. So now we know that we need something in this area to support the bend, right? We need something in this area to support the bend, but then we also need something that we can bend these feet out on, because chances are these feet are going to be out like in this direction, right? Actually drew that wrong. They'll be like this, in this direction, yeah? So we need to be able to bend that foot pad out, and in order to do that, that means we're going to need ourselves a little kiss block somewhere in here, somewhere to stop this, something that can stop this, and then we can bend this flat to it, like so. Hopefully this is making sense. Let me zoom you guys in a little closer. Hopefully that'll help in the views, and we're still in focus. I believe we're still in focus there. So now this shows you what we need to duplicate on the other side. We need something that's going to match this pitch and be welded in like so on our jig. So we can bend our little foot pad flat, if you will. And I'm deviating from the original size of the design, but I'm doing this to show you what we're looking at doing. The next part about building jigs, you do not want to place weld anywhere that you're going to have your material. So say your form, whatever your form is, in this case, this here, right? You don't want to take and place welds on this side of the form, because you have to bend against that, and you want that to stay accurate, and you don't have to grind out all that weld. So you'll want to weld on the back side of this form. Likewise, you don't want any weld on the foot. You don't want any weld on the foot here, because then it won't bend flat up against your block. So you want to put your weld on the back sides of these here. Anywhere that it won't come in contact, to where you can give the piece good support, but it will not come in contact with the item that you are trying to take and bend around. In certain circumstances, you may need to use both sides of an item, and in which case, you need to drill some holes and do some plug welds. So you drill some holes into your individual pieces, and then you fill those up with weld to the plate, and that's perfectly fine as well. Now, say you don't have a welder. Can you still make a jig? Yes, you can. All you have to do is drill, and it may require tapping into a deeper plate. So drill and tap a plate out for this purpose. So all your components that you put on the plate are both drilled and then tapped. So this way you can take the components on and off the plate if you need to. But you can put those components on there and you can just bolt them on. So you can do this with a drill and tap set as well. If you have thinner material you're working with, like say this angle iron that I'm going to be welding to here so it can lock this jig in a vise, you can take, and with this case scenario, since it's thin, you can just bolt straight through, if that's what you want to do. Now, in my particular instance, welding is a lot easier. I have a good welder, and it's just as easy to just run a quick bead across these sides, and poof, voila, my jig's done, right? So I just stick weld that up real quick, and it's no big deal, and I'm off and running. It'll take slightly more time to go ahead and drill and bolt on the holes, but depending on what you have, that may be the option for you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and weld up this jig now. I'm going to take and be using, for these handles, the last thing I wanted to talk about, let me go ahead and go into this. I know this is getting long here, ladies and gents, but bear with me here, bear with me. So the last thing I want to take and talk about this jig is the way in which that this is going to get bent. So you need clearance on a jig. I should have had another jig over here. You need clearance, height clearance on a jig to get around these blocks. You can't start bending in these blocks, okay? You can't just start bending on those blocks, because what will end up happening to you is you may gouge the front end of this. This may get a gall in it, or same thing in here, might get a gall if you just slip it down between and try to bend it around. Plus, as you come around with the material, how are you going to get it in here? So you have to start higher up and then slip it down, you know, higher up, bend it around the form, then slip it down, and then bend your feet, so to speak. So I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to make that. It's a fairly simple thing. I'm just going to do a real quick little weld job here, and you guys will get to see the jig and what I'm talking about here in just a few minutes. But make sure, once again, you start with an item that is acceptable of the shape, the size, and the form that you're wanting. Do all related work prior to the bending operation for the jig, and you'll get the same results. Make sure you do your math, figure out what your stock length is that you needed for that particular item, and you'll do just fine. So I'll be right back with you as soon as I have this welded up. Okay, everybody, I wanted to take and go over something real quick with you before I get this all welded up. It is imperative whenever you're making a good tool that you're welding up, that you're wanting to take and do replication work for maybe 100 pieces or 1,000 pieces or who knows however many pieces. You want to do your best job to make sure that the welding goes right the first time. So it is worth the extra time to go ahead and make sure everything is cleaned and prepped very well and ready for grinding. Well, I mean ready for welding. The cleaner the material is, the better it's going to weld. The cleaner the joint will look after it's all said and done, and the welder will just perform a lot better for you. So that's just a little pro tip there for you. But if you look here, basically I've got a piece of 1/4 by 1 inch flat stock, or 6 mil by 25 mil flat stock, and then I got my 2 stop blocks. These 2 stop blocks are roughly 5/8 of an inch, or 16 mil, what I believe is 16 millimeter squared. And they only come up a certain bit. And the reason why these need to be lower than this up here is when you go to bend this around the jig, like I had said before, you need clearance. You need to be able to bend this material all the way around without hitting your stop blocks. Then what happens is you slip it down, and then you go ahead and bend your feet on your stop block. So this is what you would consider a 2-stage jig. And I'll get this welded up and show you how to do it. So now I've already got another piece here, another little drawer pull, and it's ready to be bent up. I'm just going to take and show you guys that here after I get this welded, but I just wanted to take a second to show you this and how this is all prepped and share a few ideals here. So one of the other things that you may want to do is take and create yourself a custom bending fork. And now what I mean by a custom bending fork, since I'm bending this on a tangent, or I'm bending this on the diamond, it is nice to have this I made a little notched out groove, and hopefully y'all can see that just fine. Let's zoom you in a little bit. I made a little notch groove to take and fit that piece of bar stock in there, so I'm not leaving a flat spot or something like that. As I take and bend and work this piece around. So this will be welded onto this fork, and this portion of the fork will go on the inside of the arc, and this portion of the fork will grip the piece there. So now you can take and hold it with some leverage, and you can bend with a pair of tongs or a light wooden mallet or something like that. You can bend the piece and form it around the rest of the jig. And you'll see how all this comes together here in a second. So I hope you enjoyed this video so far. I'll get this welded. I'll be right back with you after I get everything on this welded up. Again, even with these jigs, make sure that you don't put any weld in on any of the riding surfaces or any of the bending surfaces. Weld to the outside of these pegs. If you can't do that, drill it and plug weld from underneath. I'm going to stick it down in here if I can. And I'm going to use my little bending wrench here to just bend it right on around the form. I could go all the way around. It's nice to be able to get this in one go if you can. I'm going to come out here a little bit. There we go. And now my form drops straight down through just like so. And what I'm going to do now that you see that it's down in here, now I need to take and go ahead and heat this up again, but heat just the ends and then hammer them over flat against here. So I'll go ahead and clip out and come back as soon as those are hot. Now that I've got it good and hot again, go ahead and drop it in my jig. Should be able to hold it fairly nice now. Beat that part flat. And it's a little hotter. If you get to this point and you know you've lost your heat, you might just go ahead and try it again. Get a little more heat on the subject. There we go. Bam. And just like that, you're done. Now this will have a tendency to shrink on these a little bit, so the sooner you can get it off there, the better off you are. And voila. Now you've got one handle completely done. So I hope you can see how easy that is to get that done. And it should be almost identical to your other ones. And now you can just keep doing this all day. Again, it's just flattening two ends and then bending away from that bend right around a jig. Fairly simple, lines everything up for you. No fuss, no muss. That's what we want. Now, you may still find at some points you may have to do just a wee bit of tweaking, straightening, things like that in your final finish work, but that's perfectly okay because it gets the bends and it gets everything locked into that same constant shape, and that's what we're after. That shaping to get this perfect each time is really kind of the pain in the butt, and so if you can get that done, you're good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave it a like and a comment what you thought. If this was helpful to you, I know it was a long one. This video was really for Graham Pepper, again, a longtime supporter of our channel. He supports us every week in our live streams, both on our Monday evening business live streams at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and our Friday night forging live streams at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And he's been a constant supporter of the channel. So Graham, this video is for you, bud, and this jig is for you as well. I'll be shipping it to you all the way down there in Australia, and I really hope it'll bless you and bless you with your little cabinet enterprise there of making little drawer pulls and stuff for your cabinet maker. So that's it for today. Hope you liked it. If you did, remember, give it a big thumbs up, and as always, God bless you, and we'll catch you on the next one.